The night my son looked at me as if I were nothing more than an inconvenience. The sky over Brighton Cove was the color of bruised steel. Thunder rolled somewhere far out over the water. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can still hear the echo of his voice, sharp, clipped, as cold as the marble floors beneath my feet. Mom, either you apologize to Selena this Saturday, in front of everyone, or you don't come back to this house. Ever. Those were the words that split my world open. But the truth is, the breaking had already begun long before that night. It began with a sound, a small sound, the faint clatter of silver against porcelain, a noise so subtle that in any other home it would have meant nothing. But in Selena Crestwood's dining room, a place where everything was curated, rehearsed, performed, it was the first crack in a mask that had been tightening around my son's life for years. I remember the light first. Chandeliers that glowed too brightly, bouncing gold across glass cabinets filled with things no one actually used. The entire room felt staged, like a set waiting for a camera crew to yell action. Selena sat at the head of the table, her posture perfect, her makeup immaculate. She wore a silk champagne dress that probably cost more than everything in my closet combined. Her hand rested lightly on Daniel's forearm, her polished nails gleaming like tiny weapons. And me? I sat at the far end of the table, a guest in a home that should have been partly mine too, at least in memory, in love, in presence. But I was already being erased. I just didn't understand how completely. Dinner had barely begun when it happened. Selena reached toward the salt shaker with that slow, graceful motion she always exaggerated when Daniel was watching. Before she could stretch, I instinctively nudged it closer to her side. A simple gesture, a common courtesy. Her eyes flicked to mine, quick, sharp, venomous. And then she performed. "Evelyn," she whispered, voice trembling as if I had slapped her instead of passing the salt. "Please, don't interfere. I didn't ask for that." Daniel froze, his fork suspended midair. Selena's breath hitched. Her lower lip began to tremble exactly on cue. I'd seen actors on hospital TV screens with less dramatic precision. I just want one peaceful dinner with your mother," she murmured, voice cracking like thin glass. A tear slipped down her cheek, beautiful, symmetrical, perfectly timed. I knew that tear. It wasn't real. It wasn't even close. But Daniel, my sweet Daniel, leaned toward her, concern softening his features the way it used to soften for me when he was small and cried after nightmares. "Selena, what's wrong? Tell me." That was the moment I felt something terrible shift inside me. I had always believed that truth, pure, simple truth, had weight, that lies broke under their own hollowness. But watching my son fold around Selena's trembling shoulders, I realized something new. Sometimes lies wear the most convincing faces. Sometimes lies cry prettier tears. Her breathing quickened. She pressed her hand to her chest as if trying to steady her heart. She always does this, Daniel. I don't know why she treats me this way. It's like I'll never be enough for your mother." I remember the room falling silent. I remember thinking, is this really happening? Is she truly doing this over salt? But the truth, the deep truth that would only hit me later, was that this wasn't about salt. It wasn't even about dinner. This was a stage. Selena was the actress. Daniel was the audience. And I, unwilling, unprepared, was cast as the villain. "Mom," Daniel said, placing his silverware down. That sound, the metal against porcelain, cut deeper than any words. "Why did you do that? Why would you embarrass Selena like this?" "Embarrass her?" I felt my breath catch. "I didn't," I whispered. "Dan, I only—" "Not now," he snapped, a tone he'd never used on me before, not even as a teenager. "Just, not tonight." And just like that, the boy who once clung to my apron strings was gone, replaced by a man sculpted by someone else's hands. But it wasn't until later, when the plates were cleared, when Selena had retreated to the bedroom to compose herself, when Daniel stood in the doorway with his arms crossed, that he delivered the sentence that would redefine the rest of my life. "Mom, if you want to be part of this family, you'll apologize to her properly, in front of our guests this Saturday. If you can't do that," his jaw tightened, "then maybe it's better if you stay away." The words struck so hard I didn't feel them at first. I just stared at him. This man who had once promised at 8 years old, "Mom, I'll never let anyone hurt you." Where had that boy gone? What had she done to him? I walked out in silence, the night air slicing across my face as the door shut behind me. Thunder cracked somewhere overhead. The sky opened, and rain poured down in sheets. My feet carried me down the street, soaked to the bone, heart hammering against my ribs so loudly I felt it in my throat. At the bus stop, beneath the flickering street lamp, I wiped the rain from my eyes and tasted salt on my lips, uncertain whether it came from the sky or from me. And as I sat on that bus, watching droplets streak down the windows like silver scars, one thought pierced through the grief. I saw her lie tonight. I saw the truth slip behind her eyes. And Daniel didn't even notice. If he could be manipulated this easily, what else had she been doing to him? What lies had she been feeding him? What pieces of him had she taken? And then somewhere between Brighton Cove Avenue and the Harbor Bridge, I remembered something I had buried, a moment from months ago. A whisper, a sentence, a shadow in Selena's voice. A sentence I had dismissed then. But now it tasted like a warning I had ignored too long. Before I go on, if you've ever experienced the pain of being turned against by someone you love, or if this opening gripped your heart even a little, leave a comment and let me know your thoughts. And if you want to hear the rest of this story, please hit like and follow. It truly helps the author continue creating these powerful stories. The bus jolted. I inhaled deeply. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to bow. I wasn't going to apologize for something I didn't do. Not this Saturday. Not ever. Because if Selena Crestwood wanted a performance, then she had no idea what kind of mother she was up against. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? The storm outside had quieted by dawn, but the storm inside me raged on, rolling and crashing through every memory I had ever stored away. When the sun finally pushed through the clouds over Brighton Cove, its light fell across my small apartment, across the faded photographs on the shelf, across the patched armchair I had kept for decades, across the quilt I had sewn from Daniel's childhood shirts. Everything in my home carried a piece of him. Every corner whispered the story of us. And now he was slipping away, one carefully planted lie at a time. I made coffee the same way. I always did 2 sugars, a splash of milk, but it tasted different that morning. Bitter, unsettled, like everything familiar was starting to shift under the weight of what had happened the night before. So I sat at my kitchen table and let memory take over. If I was going to fight for my son, I needed to remember who we were before she arrived. Before wealth and status and polished lies wrapped themselves around his life like ivy choking a tree. I closed my eyes, and the years rolled backward. Daniel was born on a snowy morning in March, in a small hospital room that smelled faintly of antiseptic and winter. I was only 26, terrified and alone. His father, Miles, had already disappeared, by then slipped out of our lives on a cold night after murmuring promises even he knew he would never keep. I still remember the nurse placing Daniel on my chest, his skin warm, his tiny fingers curling instinctively around mine. He opened his eyes dark, steady, impossibly calm. And for the first time in months, I felt strong. "You're mine," I whispered, "and I'll do everything for you." And I did. In those early years, I worked as a home care nurse during the day and cleaned offices at night. I ate toast for dinner more times than I can count so Daniel could have real meals. I patched the knees of his pants until the denim couldn't take one more stitch. I waited for buses in the freezing wind, my fingers numb, but I never let any hardship touch him. He was my reason, my compass, my light. When he was 5, he came running into our small living room, holding a crayon drawing of 2 stick figures, one tall, one small, surrounded by crooked hearts. "It's us," he said proudly. I taped it to the refrigerator and kept it there creased, sun-faded, but sacred until the paper itself began to crumble. At 8 years old, he won a little science contest at school. Nothing big, just a homemade bridge made of popsicle sticks that somehow held the most weight. He sprinted all the way home, breathless, cheeks pink from the cold. "Mom, look, I won. Look what I made." He held out the certificate like it was made of gold. And it might as well have been. Because he had built it with hope, with imagination, with those small hands I had held through every fever and every scrape. That night, I made his favorite dinner, simple noodles with butter and herbs. We didn't have much, but Daniel sat cross-legged on the floor, swinging his feet, telling me every detail about his bridge, his eyes glowing. "Someday," he declared, "I'm going to build real ones, big ones, the kind people take pictures of. And I believed him with my whole heart. As he grew older, our bond only deepened. Some mothers argued with their teenage sons, but Daniel always came home. He sat on the edge of my bed at night, talking about school, about girls he liked, about whether he should join the science club or the swim team. He would laugh at my old stories. He would hug me when I got home exhausted from double shifts. And whenever I told him I worried I wasn't giving him enough, he would take my hands and say, "You're giving me everything. You're the strongest person I know." I didn't cry easily back then. I'd grown too used to swallowing emotion like medicine, but those words cracked something warm inside me. I held on to them. I still do. When Daniel graduated high school at the top of his class, I stood in the front row, clapping so hard my hands stung. I remember looking around at all the proud parents in expensive clothes, fancy shoes, perfect hair. And there I was in my old dress, my thrifted heels, my hair tied back with the same rubber band I used for work. But Daniel found me in the crowd. His eyes lit up, and he smiled the way he always did when he saw me. "Mom!" he shouted, waving his certificate. "We did it!" Not I, but we. That night, I bought a small cake even though I could barely afford it. We ate it together in our tiny kitchen, our laughter echoing in a room that had once been too quiet. Later, he told me, "When I have my own house someday, you're living with me. No arguments." I laughed at the time. If only I'd known then how quickly promises can dissolve under the wrong influence. College changed him, but not in a bad way. Not yet. He majored in coastal engineering at Westbridge University. He studied hard, made good friends, found mentors who believed in him. Every Sunday, he still called me. Sometimes from the quiet corner of a crowded dorm. Sometimes walking across campus with autumn leaves crunching under his shoes. He always ended the call with, "Love you, Mom. I'll make you proud." And he did. He graduated with honors, landed a job at a firm designing waterfront structures, and earned his first real salary at 24. The first thing he did? He invited me to a restaurant overlooking the marina. It was more expensive than anywhere I had ever eaten. I felt out of place, tugging at the sleeves of my only nice sweater. But Daniel sat across from me, smiling like he had waited his whole life for that moment. "This is for you," he said. "For everything you did." He ordered wine, appetizers, dessert. The bill could have paid my rent for 2 weeks. But he insisted, "You deserve this." I kept the little receipt in my purse for months, not because of the money, but because of the sentiment. Because it was a night that said, "He remembers. He sees you. He honors you." I didn't know it then, but that would be the last night he looked at me with that kind of unfiltered warmth. Before Selena, before the distance, before the slow, deliberate unraveling of the boy I raised. People talk about losing their children to tragedy, to illness, to accidents, but losing a child while they're still alive, losing them to someone's manipulation, to someone's ambition, to someone's quiet, calculated greed, that kind of loss is different. It's slow, it's suffocating. It feels like your heart is being eroded grain by grain. And that erosion began subtly, almost invisibly, when Selena Crestwood swept into his life with her polished smile, her expensive perfume, and her ability to make anyone feel inadequate without raising her voice. But that part of the story comes soon. For now, as I sat in the quiet light of morning, hands wrapped around a cooling cup of coffee, I held on to one truth. Daniel wasn't always the man who stood in that doorway last night, demanding my apology like a punishment. He had been my world, and I had been his. So if Selena thought she could erase that history, she had underestimated the wrong mother. The first time I met Selena Crestwood, I remember thinking she was almost too perfect, like someone cut out of a magazine and mistakenly dropped into my modest world. At the time, I tried to convince myself that perfection wasn't a crime, that maybe I was simply intimidated, that maybe Daniel had finally found someone who could appreciate him the way I always hoped someone would. But the truth? My instincts whispered something different that very first day, and I should have listened. Daniel brought her to my apartment on a breezy Saturday afternoon. I had spent the whole morning cleaning even though my place was already spotless. I baked lemon loaves, brewed a fresh pot of tea, laid out my best plates. I wanted everything to feel warm and welcoming, the way I always tried to make our home feel when Daniel was growing up. He had called me the night before, excitement bubbling through the phone. "Mom, I want you to meet someone special." Those were the words every mother waits to hear and fears too, in some hidden, quiet place of the heart. When the doorbell rang, my hands were shaking slightly, not from age, but from hope. I opened the door, and there she was, Selena Crestwood, tall, poised, wrapped in a flowing ivory coat that looked hand-tailored. Her dark hair was parted with surgical precision. Even her perfume floated into the hallway with a kind of intentional elegance, soft jasmine layered over something sharper, something metallic. Daniel looked radiant beside her, smiling as proudly as if he'd just brought home a prize. "Mom, this is Selena." Her smile was polite, perfectly symmetrical, but her eyes, gray and cold as brushed steel, scanned my apartment in a single sweep. Not with curiosity, with assessment. A wealthier woman's version of judgment. Quiet, controlled, and deeply cutting. "Evelyn," she said lightly, "I've heard so much about you, but not Mrs. Hart. Not ma'am." Just Evelyn, as if we were distant co-workers or acquaintances she intended to keep at arm's length. I stepped aside to let them in. Daniel kissed my cheek, Selena did not. She sauntered into my living room as if she were an inspector evaluating a property. Her gaze paused on my old bookshelf, lingered on my thrifted coffee table, flicked over the faded photos on the wall. Everything in her eyes said, small, old, modest, beneath me. She didn't have to speak. Her silence was surgical. "Please, sit," I said gently. Selena touched the armchair before lowering herself into it, her fingers brushing the worn fabric as though it carried dust. She tucked her coat around herself, careful not to let the edges touch anything. Daniel didn't notice, or maybe he didn't want to. I brought out the lemon loaf, the room filled with the scent of warm sugar and zest. Daniel's eyes lit up, memories flashing like little sparks behind them. "Mom, you still make this? Selena, you have to try it. I grew up on this." Selena smiled politely. "Oh, wow, homemade. How nostalgic." The pause before nostalgic wasn't long, but long enough to sting. She declined the slice Daniel tried to hand her. "I'm watching my sugar intake, but thank you." So I sat across from them, feeling my apartment shrink minute by minute under the weight of her polite disapproval. Daniel began talking, sharing stories, updating me about work, filling the room with the warmth I had missed so deeply. He was excited, animated. I loved hearing him speak this way. But every time I laughed, every time I added a comment, every time Daniel turned his attention toward me, Selena's eyes hardened. A flicker, quick, controlled, but unmistakably real, like she was filing each moment away as something to fix later. Still, I tried. "How did you two meet?" I asked. "At a networking event in Goldridge District," Daniel approached me. Selena replied, crossing her legs with the graceful precision of someone trained in presentation. "I thought he was charming. A little unpolished but sweet." Daniel chuckled, unaware of the blade hidden inside the word unpolished. "And what do you do, Selena?" I asked, genuinely wanting to know. "I work in luxury branding. My clients expect a very elevated standard." There it was again, that sharp undertone, that subtle need to establish rank. I knew that tone well. I heard it from hospital board members, from wealthy families who treated nurses like disposable help. And here it was again, in my living room. "How lovely," I said softly. "I work well, worked as a home care nurse." Selena gave me a smile that wasn't a smile at all. Caregiving. That must have been fulfilling. Fulfilling. Not admirable. Not important. Not vital. Just fulfilling, like I had spent my life doing charity work out of boredom. Daniel didn't see it. His face was bright with pride as he said, "Mom was one of the best nurses in the county." Selena nodded once, with the kind of dismissive courtesy that said she didn't care and didn't intend to. That was the first time I saw it. The first flicker of what was coming. Later, when I served tea, my hands brushing the chipped edge of our old cups, Selena leaned over and whispered too softly for Daniel to hear. "You know, Evelyn, Daniel has worked so hard to build a new life. It would be wonderful if you tried not to overwhelm him with too much history. History, as if everything we lived through together was an anchor dragging him down. As if I should erase myself so she could rewrite him." I stared at her for a moment, not with anger, with understanding. I suddenly understood exactly what kind of woman she was, and exactly what she wanted. Daniel, not just his love, his entire world, his loyalty, his attention, his identity, and I was in the way. Things changed after that visit. Subtly at first, Daniel missed one Sunday dinner. Then, two. Phone calls shortened. Messages became fewer. Conversations were rushed. When he did come over, he was distracted, always checking his phone, always responding to Selena's texts. "Sorry, Mom," he'd say with a strained smile. "Selena needs me to pick something up." Or, "Selena's parents invited us last minute." Or, "Selena isn't feeling well tonight." Selena was always the reason. Always. At first, I tried not to mind. People fall in love. Their routines shift. It happens. But then the shifts became patterns, and the patterns became distance. And the distance became something colder, something unnatural. Because Daniel didn't just grow busy, he grew different. When he spoke about his future, it was suddenly filled with phrases I had heard from Selena in my living room. Higher social circles, more refined lifestyle, proper boundaries, managing family expectations. The boy who used to run home with popsicle stick bridges was disappearing, replaced by someone who belonged not to himself, but to her. The worst moment came a few months after that first meeting. Daniel arrived to pick up a box of his childhood books he wanted for inspiration. Selena wasn't with him that day, which was a small blessing. I handed him the box and tried to hug him. He hesitated, just a fraction of a second, but enough for my heart to feel it. "Everything okay?" I asked gently. He gave a thin smile. "Selena just thinks we should, have clearer boundaries. It's nothing bad, just healthy distance." Healthy distance. Her words, not his. Selena had been planting seeds, and Daniel was already blooming into someone I didn't recognize. Looking back, I realized that moment Daniel pulling back from my hug was the first omen, the first fracture. But I didn't want to see the truth then, because the truth was this. Selena wasn't just stepping into his life. She was rearranging it, and soon she would start rearranging him too. The changes that came after that day weren't sudden, weren't loud, weren't noticeable to anyone who didn't know Daniel the way I did. They crept in like a slow, persistent tide, quiet enough that you might ignore it at first, but relentless enough that by the time you realized what was happening, the whole shoreline of your life had shifted. At first, I tried to tell myself it was normal. That relationships take time, that priorities adjust, that Daniel wasn't abandoning me, he was simply growing into a new chapter. But deep in my chest, beneath the place where hope tried to stay alive, something darker whispered, "He's slipping away from you, Evelyn." And she's pulling him. And she was, piece by piece, breath by breath, memory by memory. The first sign came wrapped in politeness. Daniel canceled our weekly dinners 3 times in a row. He always sounded apologetic but strangely formal, as if he were reading from a script. "Mom, I'm so sorry. Selena's parents invited us for an early celebration. Hey, Mom, Selena needs help preparing for a work gala tonight. I really can't make it tonight. Selena had a tough week, and she wants us to stay home." Each excuse sounded reasonable on its own, but together, they formed a pattern. Every cancellation had her name in it. Selena needed this. Selena wanted that. Selena felt uncomfortable. Selena had concerns. Selena preferred they stay in. Selena requested privacy. I don't know exactly when it began, but Daniel's schedule eventually carved itself around her. And I became the optional piece that could be placed in whatever corner still remained. The second sign was more painful. Daniel started repeating her lines, not just echoing her tone, repeating her exact phrases. Little things at first. "Mom, you don't have to fuss. Selena says we really need to streamline our holidays this year, keep them simple." Streamline holidays? Daniel once strung popcorn on fishing line for our tiny Christmas tree because it was our tradition, our big event. Since when did he use words like streamline? Or, "Mom, you don't need to help with that. Selena thinks I should learn to handle things myself." Selena thinks. Selena wants. Selena prefers. His autonomy wasn't just shifting, it was evaporating. Every sentence that used to begin with I now began with Selena. And the way he said her name carefully, respectfully, almost like he feared upsetting some delicate glass structure, told me more than he realized. The third sign cut the deepest. It was a Sunday afternoon, the kind of day Daniel used to spend lounging in my living room, eating leftover lemon loaf, flipping through engineering magazines. The kind of lazy, perfect day that feels sacred to a mother. He called at noon. I smiled when I saw his name. Daniel, I was just about to. His voice cut through mine. Mom, listen. I know we planned on lunch, but there it was again. That tone. Forced. Practiced. As if someone were nearby, coaching him. Selena's not feeling well. Oh no, I said gently. Is she sick? Well, not sick. She's just drained. Drained. That was one of Selena's favorite words. She used it to make ordinary inconveniences sound catastrophic. I understand. I murmured. Maybe next week? There was a pause on the line. A hesitant pause like he wanted to say something else but stopped himself. Sure. Next week. But next week never came. Not for a long time. The fourth sign was small, but impossible to forget. One morning, Daniel stopped by to return a screwdriver he'd borrowed. He looked uneasy, shifting from foot to foot the way he used to when he lied about breaking a window with his soccer ball at age 10. He handed me the screwdriver quickly. Selena says I shouldn't borrow tools anymore. She thinks it makes me look dependent. Dependent. Another word I recognized. Another word from her lexicon, not his. The irony nearly made me laugh. Daniel? Dependent? The boy who used to fix our leaky faucet with duct tape and a prayer? The young man who repaired the legs of our kitchen table using plastic wedges and inspiration? The man who once built a garden bench out of reclaimed wood just to see if he could? He wasn't dependent. He was being isolated, one slowly withdrawn favor at a time, one carefully placed suggestion at a time, one stolen piece of autonomy after another. Selena wasn't cutting me out of his life bluntly. She was doing it skillfully, strategically, like pruning a tree, and I was the branch she wanted gone. Then came the fifth sign, the moment that made my breath catch, in a way I couldn't explain. I still remember it vividly. A soft rain had been falling all day. Daniel had promised he'd come by after work. I made soup his favorite, creamy mushroom. It simmered slowly on the stove, filling the apartment with warmth. I waited. 6 o'clock passed. 7. 8. By 9, the soup was cold. At 9:30, my phone buzzed. Daniel. Mom, I'm so sorry. We got caught up. Selena's feeling overwhelmed. Rain makes her anxious. We'll come next week. Love you. Rain makes her anxious. Selena wasn't 2 years old. She wasn't 5. She was a grown woman. And yet Daniel was rearranging his life around her emotional weather patterns. But that wasn't what hurt. What hurt was the absence. No phone call, no voice, no warmth. Just a message sterile, typed, distant. I stared at the soup, at the steam that once rose but now vanished, and a strange, cold realization settled into my bones. He wasn't avoiding dinner. He was avoiding me. Further signs came like dominoes falling. At a work banquet, Selena had reportedly said to a group of colleagues, Daniel's mother means well, but she can be a bit overwhelming. He's trying to set healthier emotional boundaries. Overwhelming? Me? The woman who once juggled 3 jobs so he could take private math tutoring? The woman who stayed up until dawn, helping him finish his college application essays? The woman who bought winter coats secondhand so he could have a proper graphing calculator? I didn't cry when I heard it. I didn't shout. I just felt something inside me turn solid, as if someone had flipped a switch from pain to resolve. Because people only label you overwhelming when you stand in the way of what they want. And Selena Crestwood wanted everything. Not just Daniel's future. Not just his career. Not just his money. She wanted his entire self, with no remnants left of the life before her. But the most telling moment, the moment that carved an ache directly into my heart, happened on a warm spring afternoon. Daniel came by quickly to drop off paperwork for a tax document I could help him locate. He stood in my doorway like a guest, not a son. He looked beyond me, scanning my apartment as if expecting to find chaos or disorder. He had never done that before. I handed him the documents. He nodded, stepped back, and something like tension flickered in his eyes. What's wrong? I asked. He hesitated. Nothing. It's just, Selena says I shouldn't rely on you so much. It stresses her out. Rely on me? For a tax form? Before I could respond, he added quietly, and she thinks I should, separate a bit, create space, for our marriage. Space. A cold, empty word. A word meant to wedge two people apart. That's not her choice, I said softly, because I couldn't bring myself to raise my voice. Daniel didn't argue, but he didn't agree either. He just lowered his eyes. And that silence, that heavy, reluctant silence, told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't just distancing himself. He was being distanced. And Selena Crestwood was the one pulling the strings. Looking back, I see every sign like a flashing red light. But in the moment, I tried to survive each one with dignity. Mothers always think love can fix anything. But some battles need more than love. Some battles require strategy. Some require truth. And some, like the one I was about to face, require a mother's quiet, burning fury. The moment everything inside me snapped wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even one of those explosive confrontations people imagine when they think of heartbreak. No, my breaking point came quietly, in the dim glow of my living room lamp, with a cup of untouched chamomile tea growing cold on the table, and Daniel sitting rigidly on the edge of my sofa like he couldn't wait to leave. It was that kind of silence, the kind that feels like a verdict. I had asked him to come over because I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't keep swallowing the ache every time he canceled, every time he withdrew, every time he repeated Selena's phrases like a memorized script. He arrived late, very late. Selena didn't come with him, which I was grateful for. Her presence had a way of shrinking the space around me, making me feel like a guest in my own home. Daniel didn't take off his coat. He held his car keys like a shield between us. He sat down, but not comfortably. He sat like someone waiting for a meeting to end. I tried to breathe, tried to find the right words. "Daniel," I began gently, "I feel like I'm losing you." His jaw tightened. His eyes flicked toward the door as if calculating the fastest escape route. "Mom, please don't start," he muttered. "Don't start." The boy who once told me everything his fears, his dreams now spoke to me like a burden. I didn't let it stop me. "We barely see each other anymore," I continued softly. "We barely talk. And when we do, it feels like you're somewhere else." He exhaled sharply. "Mom, I've grown up. I have responsibilities. A wife, a life. I can't be your little boy forever." A knife slid between my ribs. Quietly, cleanly. "I'm not asking for you to be a little boy," I whispered. "I'm asking not to feel like a stranger." His gaze hardened. "Selena says," there it was. "Selena says, every decision, every opinion, every shift, everything came from her now." "What does Selena say?" I asked. He hesitated, looked away, then forced the words out. "She thinks you create unnecessary tension. She says you overstep, that you guilt trip without realizing it, that you make her feel uncomfortable in her own home." Uncomfortable. The word echoed inside me like a hollow drum. "Uncomfortable," I repeated. "For passing her the salt?" Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "It's not about salt, Mom. It's everything. You're intense. You get emotional. You're always watching her, waiting for her to slip up." "I'm watching her because she is slipping up," I replied calmly, surprising even myself. "Because something about her isn't right, Daniel. I feel it." He stood abruptly. "There it is? The accusations? The drama? Selena said you'd do this?" "I'm not doing anything except trying to talk to my son." But he wasn't listening. Not really. His eyes were clouded not by anger, but by something much worse. Conviction. The kind that isn't yours. The kind that belongs to the person whispering in your ear at night. "You need to stop attacking her," he snapped. "You don't even try, Mom. You make no effort to adapt to her world." Her world. Not his world. Not our world. Her world. And he was living entirely inside it. I felt something tremble inside me. Something deep and maternal. A mix of fury and heartbreak. "I have been trying," I said quietly. "I baked for her. I welcomed her. I cleaned this place top to bottom. I have bent myself in every direction to make her comfortable." "Exactly," Daniel exploded. "You try too hard. It's suffocating." Suffocating. My son, the boy I raised through every hardship, looked at me as if I were an anchor around his neck. And then he said the sentence I will never forget. "Selena says you're too attached to me. I held up a hand, and for a moment, the room froze. "Daniel," I said softly, "do you hear yourself? You don't speak like this. Not naturally. Not the Daniel I raised." He stiffened, offended. "This is who I am now." No, I whispered. This is who she's shaping you into. That did it. He turned away from me. Not angrily. Worse. Dismissively. Mom, I don't have time for this. He stepped toward the door. Selena's waiting for me. We're having dinner with her parents. Of course they were. Every step he took felt like a closing door. I followed him to the entryway, but kept my distance. I had no strength left to chase him. He opened the door, then paused. Not out of regret, but out of obligation. This conversation wasn't helpful, he murmured. I hope, someday, you can learn to respect our boundaries. Our boundaries. Selena's boundaries. The boundaries that cut me out of his life like trimming the excess from a photograph. Good night, Mom. He walked out. Closed the door. Didn't look back. The silence that followed was not an ordinary silence. It was a burial. I sank onto the sofa. My hands trembled, but my tears wouldn't come. Not yet. Shock held them hostage. A mother knows when she's losing her child. But losing him to the woman who smiles at you politely while sharpening the knife behind her back? That's a different kind of death. I didn't call him for weeks after that. Not because I was angry, but because I had nothing left inside me to give. Every message I sent felt like begging. Every silence from him felt intentional. And it was. He texted once. Selena and I will be traveling this month. We'll catch up when things settle. Things never settled. When I finally called 3 weeks later, he declined the call. When he answered 2 days after that, the conversation lasted 62 seconds. 62 seconds. After 35 years of love. But the final confirmation that I was being pushed out systematically, deliberately came from someone I hardly expected. My neighbor, Mrs. Quinn, an older woman with a good heart and a habit of noticing things. She saw me one morning outside the apartment building and said kindly, "Oh, Evelyn, I saw your Daniel last week downtown. He looked so handsome, all dressed up with that pretty wife of his. But she didn't seem, well, she was saying such unkind things about you." My breath hitched. What kind of things? Mrs. Quinn hesitated the way people do when they're trying to protect you from a truth that will hurt no matter how it's delivered. She said you cling, that you guilt him, that every visit with you is emotionally draining. She laughed about it with another woman. Laughed about me. My throat tightened. My fingers went cold. That night, I sat alone on my sofa with the lights off, listening to the faint hum of appliances and the quiet heartbeat of the home I had built with so much love. And I realized, Selena wasn't just trying to distance Daniel from me. She was rewriting me, turning me into the villain in his story, turning him into the loyal husband, defending his fragile wife from his supposedly overbearing mother. This wasn't passive dislike. This was strategy. This was an operation. This was war. And I, for the first time in my life, felt something inside me ignite. Not rage, not bitterness, but clarity. Selena Crestwood had declared herself an enemy, and she had no idea I was about to stop suffering quietly. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, one of those deceptively calm days when the sun hangs low and warm, and the world moves gently enough to trick you into believing life is still predictable. I had gone out to cash my pension check, my mind heavy but steady, wrapped in that numbness that comes after too many disappointments. I remember thinking about making stew for dinner. I remember telling myself I wouldn't call Daniel that day. I remember convincing myself I was fine. Those small lies we tell ourselves just to make it through. The bank line was long, looping toward the glass doors. People murmured behind me, bills and receipts clutched in impatient hands. I shifted my purse onto my shoulder and glanced outside just out of habit, just to watch the people rushing through Brighton Cove's downtown district. And that's when I saw her. Selena. Only she wasn't alone. She exited the upscale cafe across the street with a man I had never seen before, a tall, sharply dressed figure in a charcoal suit. He walked too closely beside her, leaning slightly toward her as they spoke. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't performing. She didn't even seem aware of how she moved. There was tension in her shoulders, a quickness in her steps that didn't match her usual gliding, calculated grace. I froze where I stood. The man handed her a slim black folder. Selena took it instinctively, flipping it open with a practiced motion. Her eyes darted across the pages inside, quick, scanning, purposeful. Whatever she was reading wasn't casual. It was urgent. She nodded once, curtly. Then she glanced around. Not just casually, nervously. Her gaze swept the street, zigzagging across the building fronts, the pedestrians, the passing cars. And then, for one single heartbeat, her eyes landed on me. I ducked behind a pillar before she could register my face, my pulse pounding so loudly that the blood in my ears drowned out every other sound. I felt ridiculous hiding like a criminal behind a concrete column, but instinct had seized me, because in that split second, I saw something I had never seen on Selena's face. Fear. Not fear of danger. Fear of exposure. The man beside her leaned in again, his voice low, his gestures quick but controlled. Their exchange was too discreet, too rehearsed, too synchronized for comfort. He slipped a white envelope into her hand, a thick one. Cash? Documents? Something else? Selena tucked it into her purse with a flick of her wrist, then pulled her sunglasses down over her eyes as if masking herself behind anonymity. They parted ways without so much as a goodbye. He turned left. She turned right. Neither looked back. But Selena paused only a few steps away, lifted her phone, typed something rapidly. Her fingers tremble. Just a little. Then she hurried off, heels clicking sharply against the pavement, her pace breaking into something close to a flight. I stood behind the pillar long after she was gone, my mind racing so fast I felt dizzy. What had I just witnessed? A secret meeting. A suspicious exchange. An envelope. Documents. A nervous scan of the street. A tremble in her hand. An urgency I had never seen in her. Had Daniel seen her like that? Did he know about this man? Did he know about that envelope? Or was this just one more world she kept him completely outside of? I stepped out from behind the pillar slowly, cautiously, like a woman trying to walk after a sudden earthquake. The bank line moved forward, but I didn't follow it. I stepped out of line, walked outside, and crossed the street toward the cafe. My heart thudded in my chest, not with fear but with awakened instinct. The cafe windows were still clear, shadows of tables visible inside, but no trace of Selena remained, not even the faintest hint of her perfume. Inside, I approached the counter. "Excuse me," I said softly to the barista, wiping down the espresso machine. "Did you happen to notice the woman who was sitting near the window just a minute ago?" The barista didn't look up. "Which one?" "Busy day. Tall, dark hair, ivory coat," I described. "Very polished." He paused. "Oh, her. Yeah, she was here. Didn't order anything. Just sat down, checked her watch a lot, and met that guy in the suit." My stomach twisted. "You know him?" "No," he replied. "But he's been here before, always with someone different. They never buy anything, just talk, pass documents, then leave. Weird vibe." Weird vibe. Yes, that was exactly what I had felt. "That's all I know, lady," he added with a shrug. I thanked him and stepped outside again, the afternoon sun suddenly colder against my skin. My hands shook while I waited for the bus. Not with fear, not with age, but with something else entirely. Recognition. Understanding. Because in that moment, on that ordinary Tuesday afternoon, when the world kept spinning, unaware that mine had just tilted, I knew something with absolute clarity. Selena wasn't just manipulative. She wasn't just cruel, or insecure, or entitled, or petty. She was hiding something. Something big. Something dangerous. Something she couldn't let Daniel see. Something that made her hands tremble and her eyes dart. Something that required a stranger in a suit. Something that demanded secrecy. I got home, closed the door quietly behind me, and sank into my old armchair. And I thought about everything I had witnessed in the last few months. The subtle distancing, the emotional manipulation, the social isolation. The way she rewrote Daniel's memories, turning his love for me into something unhealthy, something clingy. The controlled narrative she fed to her friends, to his colleagues, to the world he inhabited now. I thought about her obsession with appearances, her meticulous mask, her curated persona, her hunger for status. And then I thought about that envelope and what might be inside. Documents, financial papers, transfers, investments, or worse. My throat tightened. I understood something then, something that made my stomach knot itself into a fist. Selena wasn't just removing me from Daniel's life. She was preparing him for something. Something she didn't want me to see. Something she didn't want anyone to question. Something that required him to be completely isolated, fully dependent on her version of reality. A plan, a scheme, a long game, a trap, and Daniel, my good, trusting, brilliant son, was walking into it blindfolded. That was the moment I stopped crying, stopped begging, stopped waiting for him to call or apologize or wake up. Because that Tuesday afternoon, as the truth sharpened like glass inside me, I made the first real decision I had made in months. I was going to find out exactly what Selena Crestwood was hiding. I was going to uncover her secrets, all of them. I was going to protect my son. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something powerful rise inside me. Determination. I didn't know where to start. I had never hired a private investigator. I had never snooped, never spied, never meddled in anyone's life, not even when Miles, Daniel's father, began disappearing for days at a time before he left us for good. I'd always held the belief that truth, no matter how delayed, would reveal itself eventually. But watching Selena slip that envelope into her purse with shaking hands, watching her scan the street like a guilty woman, watching a stranger hand her documents meant to be hidden, that was the moment the old Evelyn, the one who endured quietly, who swallowed pain to keep the peace, finally stepped aside. If Selena Crestwood thought I was weak, she wasn't prepared for the kind of woman motherhood can make you. I called Rose, my closest friend, that evening. She was the only one who had seen the slow unraveling of my life, the grief behind my careful smiles, the exhaustion behind my soft reassurances. "Rose, I need help." Her voice sharpened instantly. "What happened?" I told her everything. The cafe, the man in the charcoal suit, the envelope, the trembling fingers, the fear in Selena's eyes. When I finished, Rose didn't hesitate. "You need someone who knows how to dig," she said firmly, "and I think I know exactly who." Her nephew, Tyson Reed, was a former police investigator, one of those men who saw too much too young, who left the force, not because he was weak, but because he was tired of watching the truth get buried under bureaucracy. He now worked privately, taking on small cases, lost spouses, workplace fraud, neighborhood disputes. But Rose had always said, "Tyson is no ordinary investigator. He sees the things regular people miss." I needed someone like that, someone who could see the shadows Selena hid behind. We met the following evening at a small diner just outside Brighton Cove, away from the places Selena frequented. Tyson arrived exactly on time, tall, calm, wearing a weathered leather jacket that gave him the quiet presence of a man who didn't need to speak to command attention. He slid into the booth across from me, nodded once, and said, "Aunt Rose told me everything. Start from the beginning. Don't leave anything out." And for the first time in months, someone listened, really listened, as I unraveled the story of how I lost my son, piece by piece. Tyson didn't interrupt. He didn't overreact. He just let the puzzle form in his mind. When I finished, he asked only 2 questions. "Has Daniel ever mentioned concerns about money?" And, "Have you ever seen Selena around anyone suspicious before?" I shook my head. Daniel trusts her completely, and until yesterday, I thought her worst quality was cruelty. Tyson leaned back, eyes narrowing with thoughtful calculation. "I'll take the case," he said simply, "but I need you to be prepared. Whatever she's hiding, it might be ugly, and it might hurt your son." My hands tightened around the edge of the table. I'd rather him hurt with the truth than live blind inside her lies. Tyson nodded slowly. "Then let's start." The next 2 weeks felt like holding my breath underwater. Every day, Tyson sent small updates. "I'm tracking the man she met. His name is Julian Crowder. Julian has ties to a private investment network, not entirely legal. Selena has been seen with him before. She rents a separate mailbox in another district. She never tells Daniel where she goes on Wednesdays. There are irregularities in her financial filings." Each message made my pulse quicken, made my stomach twist, but they also fed the growing fire inside me. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't the villain in her story. Selena was hiding something dangerous. And then in the second week, I received a call from Tyson. I will never forget. "Evelyn, I found something. Something big." His tone wasn't dramatic. Tyson wasn't the type to exaggerate, but I could hear the gravity behind his words, the weight of what he'd uncovered. We met that night at a coffee shop near the harbor, one far enough from Selena's polished world that no one would recognize me. Tyson arrived with a folder thick enough to make my hands tremble even before he opened it. He placed it on the table. "Everything in here," he said quietly. You need to see. I opened the folder. What stared back at me turned my blood to ice. Bank statements, contracts, email printouts, screenshots of messages, photos taken from a distance. Piece by piece, a horrifying picture formed. Selena had been funneling Daniel's savings into investments under the Crestwood name. She had set up accounts in a different city. She had routed funds into ventures controlled solely by her. She had lied about her family's wealth. Her father was drowning in debt. Her mother was involved in financial cover-ups. Her brother had 2 fraud investigations trailing behind him. And Selena? Oh God. Selena was planning to use Daniel's impeccable credit to purchase an $800,000 property in Mariners Ridge Estates. Only the down payment wasn't coming from the Crestwoods, as she claimed. It was coming from Daniel's drained savings, all dressed up as a gift from her family. And in the event of divorce, the house and everything in it would belong to Selena entirely. Tyson flipped to the messages last. Read these, he said. And when I did, I felt my heart break in a new, sharper way. Selena wasn't just scamming Daniel financially. She was systematically erasing me from his life. Message after message between her and her mother, Lucinda. He's too close to his mother. It's unhealthy. I'm pushing him to limit contact. Once he signs the mortgage, he'll have no time for her. She keeps showing up. I'll need to create a scene. He trusts me completely. I can get him to believe anything. If I can embarrass her at dinner in front of his friends, he'll finally choose me for good. She thinks I don't know she's watching. I'll make her the villain. Every word was a dagger, but not one of them compared to the final message Tyson pointed out. Once the house is secured, he won't need her at all. I stared at the page until the letters blurred. Tyson's voice was steady. Evelyn, this is targeted manipulation. Financial and emotional. I closed the folder slowly, and when I lifted my head, something inside me had shifted. The quiet, grieving mother was gone. In her place stood someone else. A woman who had survived abandonment, hardship, humiliation. A woman who had raised her child alone. A woman who knew the cost of silence. A woman who would not lose her son to a predator in designer heels. I exhaled. When do we strike? Tyson nodded once, as if he'd been waiting for that question. Whenever you're ready. And I was. More ready than I had ever been for anything in my life. Because the moment Selena Crestwood decided to destroy me, she signed her own fate. Tyson didn't waste time. The very next morning, he arrived at my apartment carrying a second folder, thinner than the first, but somehow even heavier with meaning. He placed it on my kitchen table, next to the fading lemon loaf I hadn't had the appetite to finish. Before you look, he said quietly, you need to be prepared. What I found goes deeper than we thought. My stomach tightened. Deeper, how? He met my eyes. She's been planning this for a long time, Evelyn. Longer than you realize. I sat down slowly, bracing myself. Tyson opened the folder and spread out the documents inside. Financial records, property listings, wire transfer confirmations, but among the papers, one name kept appearing. Mariners Ridge Estates, a luxury development in the wealthiest part of the coast. Modern architecture, ocean views. Starting price, Optsut 0. And there it was, Selena's digital signature alongside Daniel's name, half-filled forms, waiting for completion. She hadn't submitted anything yet, but everything was prepared. Her plan is clear, Tyson said, pointing to the highlighted sections. She wants him to sign the mortgage next week. My heart lurched. Next week, Daniel thinks this house will be theirs, Tyson continued. But look here, she's structured the paperwork in a way that, once finalized, gives her sole ownership upon divorce. The down payment is coming from an account in Daniel's name that she already drained and rerouted. I felt dizzy. My fingertips tingled. She told him her family was contributing the down payment, I whispered. She said her parents wanted to invest in their future. That was a lie, Tyson said firmly. Her family is drowning in debt, behind on 4 mortgages, 2 credit cards in collections. Her mother is under quiet investigation for tax discrepancies. I stared at the pages, each line slicing deeper. She needs Daniel, Tyson said, not for love, but for liquidity, for credit, for stability, for access. My throat tightened so painfully I could barely breathe. She targeted him, Tyson continued. She picked him because he was alone, no siblings, no extended family, a stable job, good income, excellent credit, and paused, softening. A mother she believed she could eliminate. The words hit like a punch, but I didn't look away. I forced myself to read every number, every transaction, every forged smile hidden between the black and white lines. Because if I didn't face this truth now, I would lose Daniel forever. When I finally lifted my head, my voice was barely audible. What about the man she met? Crowder? Tyson pulled out a single sheet with a grainy photo. Julian Crowder, mid-level real estate broker, connected to an underground group that specializes in creating convenient documentation, appraisal manipulation, ownership transfers. It's all hidden, but the pattern is clear. And Selena is working with him? Has been for months. I leaned back, trembling. Pieces fell into place with horrifying clarity. The secrecy, the envelope, the trembling fingers, the scanning eyes, the timing. I swallowed hard. Daniel has no idea, does he? Tyson shook his head. None. She's been feeding him altered bank screenshots, fake progress reports, fake statements showing the money growing, all fabricated. She even created a false online portal with doctored numbers. My breath left me in a slow, painful exhale. I closed my eyes and felt a deeper kind of grief settle inside me. Not grief for myself, grief for my son, because he wasn't just being distanced from me, he was being robbed, used, manipulated, sculpted into a compliant version of himself. He had no idea he was stepping into a trap she designed. And worst of all, he trusted her the way he once trusted me. Evelyn, Tyson said gently, there's more. I opened my eyes. He reached into the folder and pulled out a stack of printed screenshots. Messages, he said. Between Selena and her mother, Lucinda. I felt a wave of dread wash over me as I took the papers, but I forced myself to read them. And the further I read, the colder my blood became. Daniel is too connected to his mother. He keeps checking on her. It's annoying. She's a problem we need to solve. I'm pushing him to see her as overbearing. He believes me. He trusts me. I'll trigger something at dinner soon. If I cry, he'll side with me. And then, the one that nearly made me collapse. Once he signs for the house, he won't have time or money left for her. She'll fade away. She'll fade away. I clenched the papers until they crumpled. Fade away. As if I were an inconvenient stain to be scrubbed out of their perfect little future. As if the years I spent raising him, loving him, fighting for him were disposable. As if motherhood were a cheap accessory to be tossed aside when no longer fashionable. My hands shook, but not from fear. From something much deeper. Tyson reached for one last document. And this, he said, tapping the page, is the most alarming. It was an email thread between Selena and Julian Crowder. Date stamped only 3 days earlier. Julian wrote, documents for the Ridge property are ready. All that's left is Hart's signature. Make sure he doesn't run it by family. And Selena replied, don't worry. His mother will be dealt with on Saturday. My vision blurred at the edges. What does that mean? I whispered. Manipulation, Tyson said. Discrediting. Public humiliation. Framing you as unstable so he dismisses anything you say. It made sense. Painful, brutal sense. Selena knew something was coming. She knew someone could expose her. She knew I wasn't as pliant as she wanted. So she planned to crush me before I could speak. Saturday wasn't just a dinner. It was an execution. Mine. The anger that filled me then wasn't loud. It was molten, heavy, focused. A mother's anger. Not the kind that lashes out. The kind that protects. The kind that stands firm. The kind that says, you chose the wrong child to target. Because Daniel may have forgotten who he was. But I hadn't. I hadn't forgotten the boy who saved his pennies for a birthday gift for me. The teenager who stayed up late helping me carry laundry up the stairs. The man who promised he'd always take care of me when he made it. Selena might have clouded his vision, but I would clear it. One revelation at a time. I looked at Tyson, my resolve settling like stone. Bring all of this, I said. Every document, every message, every screenshot, every transfer. Bring it all on Saturday. You're sure? He asked. The fallout will be massive. Yes, I whispered, because she planned to ruin me in front of an audience. I lifted my chin. But instead, she'll face the truth in front of them. I stood. My hands no longer shook. My voice did not break. I'm going to that dinner, I said, and I'm going to expose her. Tyson nodded once. approval in his eyes. "I'll be there at 8:30, he said, "right when they think they have you cornered." And with that, the war was set. In the days leading up to Selena's grand dinner, the one where I was meant to kneel, apologize, and fold myself into the shape she wanted, I felt something inside me click into place. A kind of clarity, a kind of stillness, a readiness that didn't shake, didn't waver, didn't collapse under old habits of softness. For the first time in months, I wasn't waking up with dread sitting on my chest. I wasn't pacing the apartment waiting for a call that never came. I wasn't replaying every hurt, every slight, every cold glance Daniela had given me. Instead, I spent those days preparing like a woman who finally understood she wasn't fighting for herself. She was fighting for her son. Wednesday morning, I pulled out every message Daniel had sent me over the past year. I read them chronologically, from the bright, casual texts in the beginning, to the clipped one-word replies, to the silences. Silence. 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 Then, a request for me to apologize to the woman destroying him. I laid those messages on the kitchen table like evidence from a crime scene, because that's what this was, a crime. Not in the legal sense, but emotionally, spiritually, a crime against love itself. Daniel had once sent me heart emojis at the end of every message. He stopped right around the time Selena started pushing for boundaries. I circled dates, noted patterns, tracked changes. It wasn't obsessive. It was strategy. Because to expose a woman like Selena Crestwood, I needed to think the way she thought, calculated, meticulous, unemotional. And I could do that now. Grief had burned away softness, leaving steel. On Thursday, Tyson and I met again. This time, at my apartment, where I could speak without glancing over my shoulder. He laid everything on my table, documents in neat stacks, a timeline pinned together with paper clips, a USB flash drive, screenshots, financial statements, the Crestwoods' debt records, correspondence between Selena and Crowder, and a list of known associates. He had even printed still frames from surveillance footage Selena receiving the envelope at the cafe. "She can't refute this," Tyson said simply. I nodded. "But you need to think carefully about how to reveal it." "I know. She'll try to twist things," he warned. "Cry, blame you, pretend she was manipulated too, or that she was protecting Daniel. But the evidence will speak first," I replied. Tyson leaned back, studying me for a long moment. "You're calmer than most people I've investigated for," he said. "I'm a mother," I answered. "We allow ourselves to break only when the work is done." He smiled faintly, just a flicker. "You're ready for Saturday." I nodded again. But I didn't feel brave. I didn't feel powerful. I felt aligned. Like everything in my life, every hardship, every long night of double shifts, every wound had been training me for this moment. Friday, I stood in front of the mirror for a long time. The woman looking back at me wasn't the one who cried on the bus after Daniel told me to apologize. She wasn't the woman who had begged him to see the truth. She wasn't the woman who had been cast as a problem in her own son's life. This Evelyn had lines on her face. Yes, etched from years of love, sacrifice, pain, but her eyes had sharpened. Focused. No longer pleading. No longer afraid. No longer lost. I tried on 3 dresses, just as I had when Tyson first told me what Selena was planning. I chose the gray one again, simple, structured, dignified. Not flashy. Not rich. Not expensive. Just honest, because I wanted every person in that room to see the difference. Selena covered herself in illusion. I stood in truth. Saturday morning arrived with crisp, bright sunlight. A deceptive kind of day. Beautiful, warm, calm. The kind of peaceful morning that almost makes you believe nothing terrible has been set in motion. Almost. I spent that morning cleaning my apartment, not because it needed it, but because my hands needed something to do. I dusted picture frames, wiped down the counters, organized drawers. I made tea. I sat by the window and watched the tide rise along the cove. And of all the emotions I expected, fear, dread, anxiety, none came. Instead, I felt centered, present, ready. I had lived through harder things than exposing a manipulator. I had lived through betrayal decades before, when Miles abandoned us. I had lived through poverty, exhaustion, loneliness. I had lived through raising a child alone, praying every night I was doing it right. But those battles taught me something that Selena had never learned. When you crush a mother, She doesn't weaken. She crystallizes. At noon, Rose came over. She took one look at me, and her eyes softened. "Oh, Evelyn," she whispered. "You look like a woman who's walking straight into war with her chin lifted." "I am." She took my hands and squeezed them tightly. "Whatever happens tonight, you stand tall. No shaking, no apologizing, no explaining yourself to people who weren't there to raise your boy. I promise. And when the truth comes out," she added, "don't look at Selena. Don't look at the guests. Look at Daniel." I swallowed hard. "Why?" I asked. "Because you're not fighting her," Rose said gently. "You're fighting for him." Her words landed deep because they were true. Every part of this plan wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. I wasn't trying to destroy Selena. I was trying to save my son. At 7:30 that evening, I dressed. At 7:50, I called a taxi. At 8, I stepped out in front of Daniel and Selena's house in Riverlight Heights, the place built from borrowed luxury and stolen pride. Voices floated out through the windows. Laughter, clinking glasses, soft, expensive music. The performance had already begun. I inhaled deeply, smoothing my dress. This was the night Selena intended to humiliate me, to finish dismantling Daniel's trust, to sever our bond permanently, to frame me as the unreasonable, emotional, unstable mother who didn't know how to behave. But she didn't know that I had come prepared. She didn't know Tyson was arriving at 8:30 with a briefcase full of truth. She didn't know that everything she had built, every lie she had crafted, every manipulation she had executed, would crumble in the span of a single dinner, a single speech, a single burst of revelation, a single moment of truth. I stepped toward the door, feeling the cool night breeze at my back like a silent witness. I lifted my hand. I rang the bell. And for the first time in almost 3 years, I walked into my son's home without fear. Not as a victim, but as the storm that would wash the lies away. The moment the door opened, I was hit by a wave of warmth and perfume, and soft chatter, an atmosphere crafted with precision, just like everything Selena touched. She appeared in the doorway like the leading actress in her own play, framed by soft golden light, her lips painted a deep wine red, her hair curled to perfection. "Evelyn," she said, her voice dripping honey, "I'm so glad you could make it." She leaned in as if to kiss my cheek, but stopped, just short an imitation of affection she would never offer sincerely. Her eyes glittered, triumphant. To her, tonight was already won. I stepped inside. Daniel was across the room speaking with a group of people, dressed in a navy button-up that made him look older, tired, weighed down by something he didn't yet understand. When he glanced my way, he smiled, stiffly polite, distant, the smile of a man performing for an audience rather than greeting his mother. He excused himself and walked over. "Mom," he said, touching my arm lightly, "I'm glad you're here, really." But his eyes flicked to Selena, as though seeking approval. I swallowed the ache rising in my throat. "I wouldn't have missed tonight," I replied, and I meant it. The house buzzed with conversation. Groups of elegantly dressed guests clustered near the dining room, laughing too loudly, sipping white wine and swirling it delicately as if they all belonged to some secret club. Selena had chosen her guests well, influential people, people trained to judge, people who would whisper if something went wrong, people who would watch me with assessing eyes, waiting to see what the mother would do. Perfect witnesses for the downfall she intended. Selena guided me through the room like a show pony, placing a manicured hand on my back as she introduced me to people whose names I immediately forgot. "This is Evelyn," she'd say sweetly, "Daniel's mother." No warmth, just a title. She never said it proudly, never said it with love, never said it with the respect a woman deserves for raising her son alone. Instead, she said it the way people say, "This is my mailman, this is my neighbor, this is someone who was unavoidable." "Lovely to meet you," a woman in diamonds said, offering a half-hearted smile. "Selena's told us so much." My stomach tightened. Of course she had, and I knew exactly what kind of stories she had told. At 8:15, Selena clapped her hands lightly. "Everyone, if you could take your seats," she said, her voice graceful and controlled. "Dinner is about to begin." The guests moved toward the long dining table, the centerpiece glowing with warm candles and crisp white linens. My place, of course, was far from the head of the table where Selena and Daniel sat like a perfectly curated power couple. I sat near the end, next to a woman who looked bored before the meal even started. Conversation flowed around me, barely touching me, as though people could sense the tension drifting in the air but couldn't identify its source. Daniel lifted his wine and cleared his throat. "I just want to thank everyone for being here," he began. He sounded rehearsed, tense, worried. "Selena and I wanted tonight to be special." Selena placed her hand over his, squeezing it warmly, then shot me a glance so razor-sharp it could have cut glass. "Especially because," she added softly loud enough for everyone to hear, "there's something important that needs to be addressed." The room quieted. She rose slowly, smoothly, like a queen preparing to issue a command. "Friends," she said with a dramatic sweep of her hand, "we've invited you here tonight not only to celebrate, but to witness something meaningful for our family." My pulse quickened. Here it was. Her stage. Her moment. Her humiliation of me in front of the people she desperately wanted to impress. She continued, pressing a hand softly to her chest, her voice trembling like a leaf ready to fall. "There has been tension in our home, difficult moments, misunderstandings that have been painful for me." Her eyes glistened with practiced sadness. "I have tried to be patient," she whispered, "to be respectful, but I've struggled with feeling unwelcome." The guests murmured sympathetically. Daniel looked at her with concern, real, genuine concern. My stomach curled in on itself. Selena wiped an imaginary tear. "And Evelyn has agreed," she paused dramatically, letting the silence gather, "to apologize tonight." Several guests turned toward me in anticipation. There it was. The trap, the noose she intended to tighten around my throat. Daniel looked relieved, hopeful. "Mom?" he asked softly. "Are you ready?" I stood. Slowly, deliberately, every eye turned toward me. Selena watched with a triumphant softness, her lips curved in victory. "Of course," I said gently. I walked toward the center of the dining room, feeling the energy shift as people realized something was happening, something they had not been told to expect. I stopped between Selena and Daniel, and I smiled. Calm, steady, determined. "Selena," I began. She straightened, already preparing herself to receive my humiliation. "I do have something to say." A flicker of confusion passed through her eyes. I took a breath. "Before I begin," I said loudly enough for the entire room to hear, "I need to welcome someone." A sharp knock sounded at the door. Right on time. Perfect. Selena's head snapped toward the entryway, irritation flashing across her face. "Who?" Daniel frowned. "We weren't expecting anyone else." I didn't look at them. "Actually," I said quietly, "I invited him." Daniel blinked. "You invited someone?" Selena's eyes narrowed. "Without telling us?" I turned toward the hallway. Footsteps approached, and then Tyson Reed appeared in the doorway, dressed in a dark suit, holding a sleek black briefcase. He stepped inside. Selena's face drained of color. Daniel's brows knitted together in confusion. "Everyone," I said calmly, "this is Mr. Reed. He is here to help clarify a few things." Tyson walked to my side, set his briefcase on the table, and snapped it open. Gasps echoed through the room as stacks of documents, printed emails, stamped bank statements, and screenshots came into view. Selena took a step back. "This," I said softly, "is my apology." I faced her directly, and for the first time in years, I saw panic flicker behind her perfect facade. "I apologize," I continued, "for not exposing you sooner." The room erupted into whispers. Selena's mouth opened, but no words came out. Tyson lifted the first document. "Let's begin," I said. And the storm finally broke. The room shifted instantly. An entire dining hall, filled with the clink of expensive glassware and quiet whispers, suddenly froze as if someone had pressed pause on reality itself. All eyes moved between me, Tyson, and Selena. Selena stood at the head of the table, her chest rising quickly beneath her silk dress, her painted lips slightly parted, yet no sound escaped. For the first time since the moment she entered my son's life, she didn't look composed. She looked exposed. Daniel was the first to speak. "Mom, what is this?" His voice wasn't angry. Not yet. It was confused, uneasy, frightened in a way he didn't fully understand. Tyson stepped forward, calm and collected, the way only a man used to walking through fires without flinching could be. "Mr. Hart," he said politely, "my name is Tyson Reed. Your mother has asked me to conduct an investigation to confirm certain concerns she had about your wife's financial dealings. The word investigation rippled through the room like a shockwave. Selena finally snapped out of her trance. "Daniel," she gasped, rushing toward him. "You're not seriously allowing this. This is harassment. It's—" "Selena," I said sharply. She stopped mid-sentence. That alone startled her. "Please," I continued, "have a seat." There was no malice in my tone, just finality. A mother's finality. Selena hesitated, her eyes flicking from me to Tyson to the guests who watched her with increasing curiosity. She slowly lowered herself into her chair, though her hands trembled visibly as she clutched her napkin. Tyson placed the first document on the pristine white tablecloth. It was a bank statement, Daniel's. Except the balances were far lower than Daniel believed them to be. "This," Tyson said clearly, directing his voice to the guests as much as to Daniel, "is one of several accounts owned by Mr. Hart. As you can see, the funds have been transferred out systematically over the past 8 months." Selena let out a brittle laugh, too loud, too forced. A sound that cracked at the edges. "That doesn't prove anything. I manage our finances. I make investments." "Exactly," Tyson replied, placing a second sheet beside the first. "And these are the destinations of those transfers. Notice the receiving account is under the Crestwood Family Trust, not Mr. Hart, meaning once transferred. The money legally belongs to your family, Mrs. Crestwood." A wave of murmurs spread like wildfire. Selena's mask slipped. Just slightly. "So?" she snapped, trying to recover. "Daniel agreed to support my family. We're married, aren't we? That's what spouses do, they help each other." Tyson didn't react. He calmly placed the next sheet. "Then surely Mr. Hart knew he also co-signed a pending mortgage of $800,000 in Mariner's Ridge Estates." Daniel blinked. "What mortgage?" The entire room held its breath. Selena's voice shook for the first time. "Daniel, honey, it was supposed to be a surprise." "A surprise?" he repeated. "A mortgage?" Tyson slid the contract toward him. "Mr. Hart, note that the property title, should this mortgage be approved, would belong solely to your wife, due to an addendum added during the drafting phase." Daniel stared at the contract, his breath catching. "What addendum? Why would the house only be in Selena's?" "She told me her parents were covering the down payment," I said quietly. "Except they weren't. She was using your savings." Daniel's hands began shaking, not with anger yet, but with disbelief. Selena bolted from her chair. "That's not true. My parents—" Tyson tapped the folder. "Your parents are 3 months behind on their primary mortgage. Your father took out 2 lines of credit in the past year, and your mother is under review for financial discrepancies. Shall I show the documents?" Selena's face drained of color. Daniel staggered a step back, rubbing his hands over his mouth. "Selena, tell me this isn't true. Please." The desperation in his voice twisted my heart painfully. But Selena didn't answer him. She answered me. Her eyes snapped to mine, sharp, vicious, terrified. "You," she hissed. "You hired someone to spy on me, to turn Daniel against me. You've always hated me. You've always been jealous." I stepped forward before she could finish, my voice steady as stone. "I wasn't jealous of you, Selena. I was watching you lie to my son, and I was waiting for the truth to come out." "You're twisting everything," she cried, voice rising higher with each word. "None of this proves anything. It's all taken out of context. Anyone can make documents look misleading." Tyson didn't flinch. He clicked a small device. Speakers crackled, and the room fell silent. Then, a recording played. Her voice. Selena's voice. Clear as day. "Julian, once Daniel signs, the house is mine. He won't question it. He trusts me too much." Gasps filled the room. Daniel's face crumpled. Selena shot up so fast her chair toppled backward. "That's edited," she shouted. "That's not real. You don't understand." Another recording. "His mother is too involved. I need her out. The more distance, the better." Selena lunged toward Tyson as if to grab the device. Daniel grabbed her arm. "Stop. Just one word. One command." But it froze her. "Selena," he whispered, his voice broken. "What did you do?" She swallowed hard, then tried again, the final desperate gasp of a drowning liar. "I did it for us." "No," he said, "you did it for you." The room felt smaller, hotter, colder, sharper. Selena's gaze darted wildly between the guests' faces once impressed by her, now twisted in disappointment and stunned revulsion. Tyson placed the final document on the table. A printed message from Selena to her mother. Once the dinner happens, he'll be too embarrassed to defend her anymore. After that, she's out of our lives. That message broke Daniel. He shook his head slowly. No, he whispered. No, you used me. You used us. You lied to me. You lied about your family. You tried to get rid of my mother. Selena's tears, real this time, started to fall. But Daniel didn't reach for her. He stepped away. Then again. And again. Selena reached out, hand shaking. Daniel, please, please don't do this. But he pulled back. Don't, he choked out. Don't touch me. The silence that followed was absolute. Guests lowered their eyes. Some shifted uncomfortably. Some whispered. Some stared openly at the unraveling woman who had manipulated them too. Selena's legs gave out. She fell to her knees. Not gracefully, not dramatically, but like a puppet whose strings had finally snapped. She sobbed, mascara streaking down her cheeks. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, she whispered. No, it wasn't, because she had planned to humiliate me tonight. Instead, she had destroyed herself. And for the first time since Daniel had fallen under her spell, I felt a weight lift from my chest. Not joy, not triumph, but the quiet, aching release of truth finally breathing. Daniel turned to me. My son, his eyes red, his expression shattered, his entire world collapsing around him. Mom, he whispered. Mom, I didn't know. And everything in me softened, because this moment wasn't about revenge. It was about revelation. I reached out. He stepped into my arms. And he cried. Daniel didn't let go of me for a long time. It didn't matter that the room was full of stunned executives, socialites, and influencers frozen mid-breath. It didn't matter that Selena was still kneeling on the polished floor, her sobs small and jagged, echoing off marble and glass. It didn't matter that half the guests were already quietly sending messages to their group chats, ready to spread the story the moment they left the house. All that mattered, in that suspended pocket of time, was my son, broken, trembling, finally awake. His arms clung to me with the desperation of a man drowning who had suddenly felt solid ground beneath him. His body shook with each breath he tried and failed to control. Mom, I'm so sorry, he whispered against my shoulder, the words fractured. I didn't see it. I didn't see anything. I cupped the back of his head the same way I had when he was a teenager, crying over a lost scholarship, the same way I had when he scraped his knee at 8 years old and thought the world was ending. It's all right, sweetheart, I murmured. It's all right now. But we both knew it wasn't. Not yet. Because truth is heavy. Truth doesn't fix. It reveals. And what it had revealed tonight was devastating. Daniel slowly stepped back, wiping his face with the back of his hand, his expression a mixture of disbelief, disgust, and profound sorrow. He turned to look at Selena again. She was staring at the floor, her hair fallen from its perfect curls. One earring missing, mascara smeared into dark, pitiful streaks down her cheeks. She looked nothing like the polished woman who had greeted everyone hours earlier. She looked small. She looked caught. She looked ruined. Why? Daniel whispered, barely audible. Selena lifted her head slowly, blinking through tears that now came from raw panic rather than manipulation. I did it for us, she choked out. We needed the house. We needed the stability. Your mother, she was holding you back. No, Daniel's voice was sharp. Don't talk about her. Selena flinched. He stepped toward her just a single step, but the force of it made everyone tense. You lied to me about everything, he said. About your parents, about the money, about the investments. You took my savings. You forged my trust. You made me push away my own mother. She shook her head frantically. I didn't make you. You did, he said, voice breaking. Selena, you did. Then he said the sentence that changed everything. I don't know who I am when I'm with you. Selena let out a cracked sound, something between a gasp and a sob. Daniel didn't kneel for her. He didn't comfort her. He didn't offer his hand. He simply turned away. And in that moment, something in their marriage quietly died. The guests began to disperse slowly, awkwardly, as though leaving a crime scene. Some gave me small, apologetic nods. Others avoided eye contact entirely. A few whispered, unable to hide their fascination. When the front door finally shut behind the last person, only 4 of us remained. Daniel, Selena, Tyson, me. Selena sat on the floor, hugging her knees, refusing to look up. Tyson packed the documents calmly, professionally, as if exposing a scheme at a dinner party was just another Tuesday for him. And Daniel stood motionless, staring at the far wall, his breath shaky. He looked like a man who had just watched his life collapse into rubble and didn't yet understand how to sift through it. "Daniel," I said gently, "let's go somewhere else. You don't have to stay here tonight." He didn't answer. He looked around the room at the expensive decor, the carefully curated vases, the crystal glasses still half filled on the table, all the pieces of a world he had let Selena build around him, brick by brick. A world that wasn't his. A world that had never included me. A world he now realized was a cage. Finally, he nodded. "Yeah," he whispered. "Yeah, I can't be here." Selena's head snapped up, panic flaring. "Daniel, wait. You can't just." But he was already walking toward the door, and I followed him. Tyson paused, offering me a respectful nod. "I'll be in touch," he said. "There's more we can do legally and financially." "Thank you," I replied softly. Before I walked out, I turned back toward Selena. She stared at me with a mixture of hatred and fear, like a predator cornered for the first time in her life. "You should have left him alone," I said quietly. Her jaw clenched. "You won't get him back," she hissed. "He's not the same boy you raised." I held her gaze without flinching. "No," I said. "He isn't." Then I added, gently but firmly, "He's a man, and men can wake up too." I closed the door behind me, and that was the last time I saw Selena Crestwood as Daniel's wife. Daniel and I walked to my taxi in silence. He climbed in beside me without hesitation. When we reached my apartment, he stopped in the doorway, looking at the place he had grown up in. His shoulders shook, his breath thin. "I'm sorry," he whispered again. I placed a hand on his cheek. "Let's get you inside." He slept on my couch that night, fully clothed, emotionally drained, curled into himself like a child who finally felt safe enough to collapse. I sat across from him in the armchair, watching him breathe. He had aged years in a single night, but there was something new in his expression even as he slept. A softness, a release, a freedom he didn't yet recognize. When morning came, he didn't open his eyes at first. He whispered, "Mom, thank you. If you hadn't done that." His voice cracked. I leaned forward. "You're home," I said softly. "That's what matters." And he cried again. Not the shattered way he cried last night, but the way a man cries when he finally realizes he's been held in darkness and someone has turned on a light. Over the next weeks, Daniel moved into a small apartment 2 blocks away from mine. Quiet, away from the noise of Riverlight Heights, away from the poisonous glamour Selena had wrapped around him. He changed his number. He blocked Selena. He threw himself into work, but not to escape this time, to rebuild. Tyson guided him through freezing Selena's access to accounts and recovering what he could. The legal process would be long, but Daniel had documentation, witnesses, and evidence. Selena sent emails, left voicemails, even wrote letters. Daniel didn't respond. And through all of it, I didn't gloat. I didn't remind him of the pain he'd caused me. I didn't rub salt into the wounds of his guilt. I kept my door open. I kept Sunday dinners warm. I kept the lights on in the evenings, just in case he needed to talk. Slowly, painfully, beautifully, my son came back to me, not the boy he once was, but the man he had always meant to be. Daniel didn't transform overnight. Healing is not a switch, it's a long walk back through a forest you didn't know you had entered. But little by little, he found his way. He'd show up at my door unexpectedly, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with old photo boxes he'd retrieved from the house he once shared with Selena, sometimes with nothing but the look of a man who needed to be near someone familiar. The first few weeks, he barely spoke. He listened. He apologized. He sat quietly in the armchair across from me, the same way he used to sit after school when he was overwhelmed by homework or heartbreak. There were nights he arrived with red eyes, evidence of the divorce proceedings wearing him down. There were mornings he knocked early, holding my favorite pastries. There were afternoons he silently helped me fold laundry, though he had never been good at folding before. But everything he did carried a new gentleness, a new awareness, A new gratitude. One afternoon, he brought a cardboard box with something wrapped inside. I unwrapped it carefully. Photographs. Old ones. Sun-faded ones. The pictures from his childhood that had once hung in the hallway of his marital home, pictures that suddenly disappeared the day Selena redesigned the decor. He had found them buried in the garage, behind racks of clothes Selena didn't wear anymore. Daniel held the stack nervously, waiting for my reaction. "I thought she threw them away," he whispered. I brushed my thumb over one photo. Daniel at 5 years old, missing his front teeth, holding a beach ball bigger than his head. "Why would she hide these?" he asked softly. I looked up at him. "To remove me," I said. "From your past, from your walls, from your life." Daniel's jaw tightened. Pain flashed in his eyes. A deeper pain than anger. The pain of realizing he let someone rewrite the story of his life. "I won't let that happen again," he murmured. "I promise you, Mom, never again." I placed my hand over his. "You're here now," I said gently. "That's what matters." When the divorce papers were finally served, Selena didn't go quietly. She sent Daniel pages of excuses. Voicemail after voicemail pleading for forgiveness. Long emails claiming she had changed. Handwritten letters describing her emotional struggles, her mistakes, her stress. One even said, "Your mother orchestrated everything. She tricked you. She hates me." Daniel showed me that letter. He didn't cry. He didn't get angry. He simply whispered, "I can't believe I ever believed her." That sentence stayed with me for days. Because truth didn't just free him, it cleansed him. Months passed. The divorce battle raged in court, but Tyson made sure Daniel was protected. They recovered nearly half of the money she had siphoned. They prevented her from securing the Mariners Ridge property. They exposed the Crestwood family's web of debts. Selena's social circle, once her pride, closed its doors. One by one. Quietly. But completely. Her name stopped appearing in charity newsletters. Her invitations were rescinded. Her work clients distanced themselves. By the time winter arrived, the Crestwoods had sold their house and moved out of Brighton Cove altogether. I heard she moved back with her parents. I heard the debts caught up. I heard she tried rebuilding her reputation in another city. But I didn't feel triumph, nor pity. Just closure. Daniel's life, on the other hand, began to bloom. He started therapy. Picked up running again. Bought a plant for his new apartment, a small fern he named Jupiter. Started cooking simple meals. Rediscovered the engineering projects he once loved. Laughed more. Slept better. One day, I walked into his apartment and found a framed photo on his wall. It was the two of us, taken when he was 12. Both smiling with wind-tangled hair, standing on the edge of Brighton Cove's pier. "I thought you didn't like this photo," I said, surprised. "You always said you looked awkward." "I do," Daniel laughed. "But that was a good day, and I want to remember good days." He placed a second frame beside it, the popsicle stick bridge he built in the 3rd grade. A photo I hadn't seen in years. "You kept that?" I whispered. "Always," he replied, "even when she made me hide it." The way he said that last sentence, soft, ashamed, but healing, made my heart break and mend all at once. During one of our usual Sunday dinners, Daniel set down his fork, looked at me for a long time, and said quietly, "I'm scared I don't deserve your forgiveness." I reached across the table and took his hand. "Forgiveness isn't something you earn," I said softly. "It's something a mother gives." He swallowed hard. "But I hurt you," he whispered, "and I believed her over you, and I pushed you away, and I let her erase you." "You came back," I replied. "That's enough." He looked at me with a raw, genuine vulnerability I hadn't seen in years. "Thank you," he murmured. And for the first time since the night everything shattered, I saw light in his eyes. Real light. Daniel's light. The boy from the popsicle bridge. The man I raised. The son I never stopped loving. Life didn't magically revert to the way it was before. It became something new. Daniel visited me every Sunday, but not out of guilt. Out of choice. Out of love. He called me 3 times a week, sometimes to talk, sometimes to ask for recipes, sometimes just to say goodnight. He helped me fix my leaky faucet. He planted flowers outside my building. He started joining me on morning walks along the cove. Slowly, gently, beautifully. We built a new version of us, one that couldn't be stolen again. Not by anyone, not even by someone as calculated as Selena. One evening, Months after the truth came out, Daniel and I sat on a bench overlooking the water. The sky glowed orange and pink, the waves brushing the shore like soft hands smoothing out wrinkles. "Mom?" he said. "Yes, sweetheart. Thank you for not giving up on me," he whispered. "If you had, I would have lost everything. My money, my dignity, my future, and worst of all, I would have lost you." I placed my hand on his. "I was never going to give up on you," I said. "Not in 100 lifetimes." He leaned his head on my shoulder, just like he did when he was little and life felt too big for him. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt peace. Not the peace that comes from surrender, but the peace that comes from surviving, fighting, and reclaiming what was mine. My son, my dignity, my truth. Tonight, as I watch the sunset dip beneath the horizon, I remind myself, and any mother who ever felt erased, silenced, or pushed aside, you do not have to shrink to make space for someone else. You do not have to disappear just because someone wishes you would. You do not have to endure cruelty disguised as respect. Fight, speak, stand, because lies crumble, manipulation shatters, facades fall, but a mother's love, the strong, stubborn, unbreakable kind, always outlives the storm, always.